died on May the 14th, 2008. At least, that's what everyone thinks. My name is Brandon Swanson, and I need to tell you what really happened that night. The night I vanished without a trace on a dark Minnesota highway. The night that turned my parents into ghosts of themselves, searching for answers that seemed impossible to find. But here's what nobody knows. I've been watching them this whole time. Every search party, every news interview, every tear my mother shed into her coffee cup at 3 a.m. And after 15 years of silence, I'm finally ready to tell the truth about the thing that chased me into the darkness, the choice I had to make, and why I'm coming home now when everyone has given up hope. This isn't just a missing persons case. This is my confession. If you've ever lost someone without closure, if you've ever wondered what happened in those final moments, don't scroll away. This story will change how you see everything, and when you hear what I have to say, I need you to share it, because there are others out there still running, still hiding, and their families deserve to know they're not crazy for holding on to hope. Hit that subscribe button right now, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why some disappearances aren't what they seem, and you'll never look at missing persons cases the same way again. Let me take you back to where it all started. A college party in Marshall, Minnesota, and a decision that would fracture reality itself. The night air tasted like freedom and cheap beer. May the 13th, 2008, started like any other end-of-semester celebration at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. I was 19, invincible in the way that only teenagers who've never truly suffered can be, and I was celebrating the end of finals with my friends at a party just outside of Canby. The music was too loud, the laughter was genuine, and I had no idea I was living the last normal moments of my life. My parents, Brian and Annette, were 40 miles away in Marshall, probably watching the news or reading before bed, trusting that their only son would make it home safely like I always did. I can still picture my mom's reading glasses perched on her nose, my dad's weathered hands folded over his chest as he dozed in his recliner. They were simple people, good people, who worked hard, loved deeply, and never imagined their son would become a headline. I stayed at that party longer than I should have. Looking back now, I can see the universe giving me exit points, moments where I could have made different choices. When my friend Jake offered to let me crash on his couch, I should have said yes. When the clock struck midnight and something in my gut whispered, "Stay," I should have listened. But I was 19 and stupid and convinced I knew better than my instincts. I got into my Chevy Lumina around 12:30 a.m. feeling more confident than I should have been. I'd had a few drinks, yeah, but I felt fine. Clear-headed. Capable. The kind of lies young men tell themselves when they think consequences only happen to other people. The roads between Canby and Marshall were familiar to me. I'd driven them dozens of times. Straight shots through farmland, minimal traffic, easy navigation, even in the dark. Except that night, nothing went according to plan. The gravel roads all looked the same in the darkness. Minnesota farmland stretches out like an ocean of black in the middle of the night. No streetlights, no landmarks, just endless fields and the occasional distant farmhouse light. I thought I knew where I was going, but somewhere between point A and point B, the road betrayed me. Or maybe I betrayed myself. Either way, I ended up on a gravel road that didn't feel quite right, squinting at intersections that didn't match the map in my head. Then I felt it. The sickening lurch as my front tire caught the ditch. The Lumina lurched hard to the right, and despite my efforts to correct, I slid into the shallow drainage ditch along the road. Not a dramatic crash, not a violent rollover, just an embarrassing, frustrating miscalculation that left me stuck, the rear tires spinning uselessly in mud and grass. I sat there for a moment, hands still gripping the wheel, cursing myself. My parents were going to kill me, or worse, they were going to be disappointed. I tried rocking the car forward and back, giving it gas, willing it to find traction. Nothing. The Lumina was well and truly stuck, and I was in the middle of nowhere with no clear idea of exactly where nowhere was. That's when I made the call that would define everything that came after. I pulled out my cell phone, a basic flip phone, nothing like the smartphones of today, and dialed my dad. It was 12:54 a.m. when he answered, his voice thick with sleep but instantly alert when he heard my predicament. "Dad, I'm stuck in a ditch," I told him, trying to sound more annoyed than worried. "I need you to come get me." "Where are you?" he asked, and I could hear him already moving, probably pulling on pants, reaching for his keys. That's when I made my first real mistake of the night. I looked around at the darkness, at the empty fields, at the road signs I could barely make out, and I lied. Not intentionally, I genuinely believed what I was telling him. "I'm just outside of Lind," I said, "near the grain elevators." But I wasn't. I was nowhere near Lind. I was actually northeast of Marshall, not northwest. A simple directional error, yet that would have catastrophic consequences, though neither of us knew it yet. My dad and mom immediately got in their truck and headed toward Lind, searching for their son in completely the wrong location. We stayed on the phone as they drove, my dad's voice a steady anchor in the darkness that surrounded me. I got out of the car thinking maybe I could see landmarks that would help pinpoint my location. The May night was cool but not cold, and the silence of the prairie at night is a specific kind of quiet, heavy and absolute, broken only by the whisper of wind through fields. "I'm going to start walking," I told my dad. "I think I see the lights of Marshall. If I head toward them, I'll hit the main road, and you guys can pick me up." My parents were hesitant, but they understood the logic. They kept driving toward Lind while I started walking along the gravel road toward what I believed was the town of Marshall. I kept my phone pressed to my ear, maintaining that connection to them like a lifeline. We talked about everything and nothing: the party, my classes, what we'd do once I got home. Normal conversation to mask the abnormal situation. I walked for over 40 minutes, my phone battery slowly draining, my confidence beginning to crack. The lights of Marshall never seemed to get closer. The landscape remained oppressively dark and featureless, and my parents, searching the area around Lind, couldn't find any trace of me or my car. "Do you see us?" my dad asked periodically, flashing his truck's headlights. "Do you see our lights?" "No," I kept answering, a knot of confusion tightening in my stomach. "I don't see anything." That's when I began to realize something was very wrong. Not just wrong in the sense that I was lost, wrong in a way that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The darkness around me felt different, heavier, like it was watching me. I heard the water before I saw it, the yellow Medicine River, though I didn't know that's what it was at the time. I just heard the sound of moving water somewhere ahead of me in the darkness. I kept walking, kept talking to my dad, kept trying to make sense of a situation that was making less sense by the minute. "Dad, I'm near some kind of river or creek," I said. "I can hear water." Then I saw them. Lights in the distance, but Not the kind of lights I expected. Not the warm glow of farmhouse windows or the harsh fluorescence of town streetlights. These lights were different. They moved in ways that didn't make sense, hovering and shifting position like nothing I'd ever seen before. "Oh shit," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. "What?" my dad asked urgently. "Brandon, what is it?" I stood there, frozen, watching those impossible lights drift across the field ahead of me. Every rational part of my brain tried to explain them away. Car headlights, except they were moving perpendicular to any road. Spotlights from a farm, except no beams traced back to any source. Helicopters, except there was no sound. "Brandon!" My dad's voice was sharp now, edged with real fear. "What's happening?" The lights were getting closer. Not approaching in a straight line, but weaving, searching. Like they were looking for something, like they were looking for me. And that's when I felt it, a pull, an invitation, a command I didn't understand but recognized in some ancient part of my brain that predated language. I started backing up, my eyes locked on those lights, my phone still pressed to my ear. "There's something out here," I whispered, not wanting whatever it was to hear me, even though that made no logical sense. "Dad, there's..." The lights pulsed, and I felt it in my chest like a second heartbeat. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but I was paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of what I was witnessing. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen, and yet there they were, hovering above the field, bathing the landscape in a light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I'm going to run," I said, my voice shaking. "I need to..." And then I was running, crashing through the brush along the river, my phone bouncing against my ear, my dad's voice shouting questions I couldn't answer. The lights followed, not chasing exactly, but tracking, maintaining their distance like predators letting prey exhaust itself before closing in. My foot caught on something, a root, a rock. I'll never know. And I stumbled hard. The phone flew from my hand and I heard it hit something solid with a crack that probably shattered the screen. I scrambled toward where I thought it had landed, my hands raking through the grass and dirt, desperate to maintain that connection to my parents, to the normal world, to reality itself. My fingers closed around the phone just as the lights surged forward, and I did the only thing I could think of. I pressed the phone back to my ear and I screamed, "Oh shit." Those final words that would be analyzed and debated and theorized about for the next 15 years. Then the phone went dead. Not because the battery died, though that's what the police would later assume. It went dead because I threw it as hard as I could into the darkness, turned, and dove into the freezing water of the Yellow Medicine River. The shock of the cold water drove the air from my lungs. The current was stronger than I expected, pulling at my clothes, my shoes, my resolve. But the lights stayed on the bank, sweeping back and forth but not crossing the water. I let the river carry me, keeping my head barely above the surface, watching those impossible lights search for me until the current pulled me around a bend and they disappeared from view. I dragged myself onto the far bank a quarter-mile downstream, shivering violently, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. The logical part of my brain was already working to rationalize it. I'd been drinking, I was stressed, I was lost and disoriented. Mass hallucination caused by panic and exhaustion. But my body knew the truth. My racing heart, my shaking hands, the primal terror still flooding my system. They knew I'd encountered something that shouldn't exist. I sat there in the mud, dripping and shaking, and I had to make a choice. I could go back, I could find a farmhouse, call for help, rejoin my life, and spend the next 15 years being told I'd imagined things, being medicated and analyzed, and never quite believed. Or I could disappear. I could find out what those lights were, why they'd come for me, and whether I was insane or whether I'd stumbled onto something the world wasn't ready to know. I chose the truth over comfort, and that choice cost me everything. The first 72 hours were the hardest. I hid in abandoned farm buildings, watched from a distance as search parties combed the fields, heard helicopters overhead, and knew my parents were out there destroying themselves, looking for me. Every moment I wanted to stand up, wave my arms, end their suffering. But I couldn't. Not yet. Because the lights came back every night, searching. I learned to move only during the day, to hide whenever I heard vehicles, to stay near water because for some reason the lights wouldn't cross it. I stole clothes from a donation box outside a church, took food from unlocked garages and porches. I became a ghost, haunting the landscape of my own disappearance, watching the world mourn someone who wasn't actually dead. The media attention was overwhelming. My face was everywhere. On television, on posters, in newspapers. My parents gave interviews, their faces hollow with grief and confusion. My mom's voice shook as she told reporters about our last phone conversation. My dad's hands trembled as he held up photos of me, begging anyone with information to come forward. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to them and end this nightmare. But on the third night, I saw what happened to someone who didn't hide from the lights. His name was Marcus Webb, though I didn't learn that until much later. He was a long-haul trucker who'd had the misfortune of breaking down on a county road about 15 miles from where I disappeared. I watched from the shadows of a tree line as those lights appeared above his stalled semi, pulsing with that same hypnotic rhythm. Unlike me, Marcus didn't run. Maybe he was braver. Maybe he was more curious. Maybe he just didn't have the benefit of that primal terror I'd felt to warn him away. The lights descended and Marcus walked toward them like a man in a trance. I wanted to shout, to warn him, but fear kept me silent. The lights engulfed him, and for a moment, he was suspended in that impossible glow. His body rigid, his mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear. Then the lights rose back into the sky, and Marcus was still standing there. But something fundamental had changed. He got back in his truck, started the engine like nothing had happened, and drove away. But I saw his eyes as the headlights swept past my hiding place. Empty, vacant, like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that made him human, leaving only a shell that knew how to go through the motions of living. That's when I understood. Whatever those lights were, they didn't just want to find me, they wanted to take something from me. Some essential part of who I was. And they were patient. They would keep searching, keep hunting, until they got what they wanted. I couldn't go home. Not while I was being hunted. Not while the danger of leading those things to my family existed. So I kept running. Over the following weeks, I made my way east, staying off the grid, using the survival skills my dad had taught me during our camping trips. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd prepared me to survive in the wilderness, never imagining I'd use those skills to disappear from his life entirely. I slept in culverts and abandoned buildings, bathed in streams, and slowly transformed from Brandon Swanson, college student, into something else entirely. I wasn't alone, though. As I traveled, I started finding others like me. People who'd encountered the lights and run instead of staying. We recognized each other somehow, maybe in the way we moved. Always alert, always scanning the sky, always near water or shelter. We didn't talk much at first. The paranoia was too strong. The fear that anyone could be one of the empty ones. The shells that looked human but weren't anymore. Her name was Sarah Kellerman, and she'd been running for 7 years. She found me outside of Des Moines, shivering under a bridge, nearly delirious from hunger and exhaustion. She could have kept walking, should have kept walking. Instead, she threw me a protein bar and said 5 words that changed everything. You saw the lights too. Sarah taught me how to really survive. Not just physically, but mentally. How to maintain your humanity when you've been stripped of everything that defined you, your name, your home, your family, your entire identity. She showed me the network of runners, the underground system of safe houses and coded messages, the way we communicated through graffiti symbols that looked like random tags to anyone who didn't know the language. There were dozens of us. Some had been running for months. Others, like Sarah, had been gone for years. Each had a story eerily similar to mine. A night alone, a mysterious encounter with lights that defied explanation, and a split-second decision to run rather than submit to whatever those things wanted. We were connected by our shared impossible experience and our collective insanity, or at least what the world would call insanity. But here's what we discovered. Piece by piece, sharing information like scientists working on a puzzle none of us could see the full picture of. The lights weren't random. They followed patterns. They appeared in rural areas, always at night, always near water sources. And they were looking for specific people, young adults, healthy, no major medical conditions, no serious criminal records. People who wouldn't be immediately missed by extensive social networks, people on the fringes. They'd taken me for a typical case, a college kid who'd been drinking, who'd gotten lost, whose disappearance could be easily explained by misadventure or suicide, or simply walking into the wilderness and succumbing to the elements. I fit their profile perfectly, except I'd run instead of staying, and that changed everything. Sarah and I became partners in survival. She'd lost her fiancé to the lights, not taken, but killed when he tried to fight back against them. The guilt of leaving him there ate at her every day, but it also made her fierce, determined to understand what we were dealing with and find a way to stop it. Together, we started researching, spending hours in public libraries, using computers we'd access, by claiming we were homeless, and using social service resources. The pattern went back decades. Missing persons cases with similar characteristics, rural areas, nighttime disappearances, last communications about seeing strange lights. Cases that were written off as voluntary disappearances or accidents or foul play, but that we recognized as something else entirely. A hunting pattern, a harvest. And here's the question I need you to think about right now. How many missing persons cases are exactly what they appear to be? And how many are something else entirely? Think about the people in your life who vanished without explanation, the stories you've heard about people who simply walked away and never came back. What if some of them didn't walk away? What if they ran? Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain? Something that made you question everything you thought you knew about reality? I need to know we're not alone in this. The deeper we dug, the darker it got. We found classified government documents that had been leaked, references to unexplained aerial phenomena and extraction events, and spontaneous human disappearances. We found blog posts from conspiracy theorists that were written off as crazy, but that described exactly what we'd experienced. We found each other, a growing network of runners who'd chosen truth over the comfort of denial. 3 years into my disappearance, I learned my mother had never stopped searching. While the official investigation had been scaled back to a cold case, while the media attention had faded, while the world had moved on, Annette Swanson spent every spare moment and every extra dollar trying to find her son. She organized annual searches on the anniversary of my disappearance. She fought to keep my case in the public eye. She never gave up hope that somehow, some way, I would come home. Learning this nearly broke me. I was hiding in a library in Omaha, using their computers during a period when Sarah was scouting locations further west. I'd made the mistake of searching my own name, something we were taught never to do. It left digital footprints, created patterns that could be tracked. But I was tired and lonely, and desperate for some connection to the life I'd lost. So I typed Brandon Swanson into the search bar. The results destroyed me. Article after article about my mother's tireless advocacy. Videos of her speaking at conferences about missing persons, her voice strong but her eyes hollow. Photos of my father, aged beyond his years, standing in the same fields where I'd disappeared, still looking, still hoping, still waiting for a son who'd chosen to stay gone. I sat in that library until they kicked me out at closing, tears streaming down my face, my chest so tight I could barely breathe. What had I done? What kind of monster lets his parents suffer like this when he could end it with a single phone call? The guilt was suffocating, crushing, worse than any fear of the lights. That night, I nearly turned myself in. I walked to a police station, stood outside for an hour, my hand reaching for the door handle a dozen times. But each time I remembered Marcus Webb's empty eyes. I remembered the others we'd found who'd been taken and returned. Shells that looked like people but weren't. That went through the motions of life while something else piloted their bodies. I remembered that going back didn't just risk me. It risked leading those things to everyone I loved. Sarah found me sitting on a bench at dawn, still staring at the police station. She didn't say anything, just sat next to me and waited until I was ready to talk. When I finally told her what I'd learned, what I was feeling, she took my hand and shared her own story. Her fiancé David had been one of them, one of the ones who'd submitted to the lights instead of running. He'd come back 3 days after his encounter, confused about where he'd been, with no memory of the missing time. Sarah had been relieved, grateful, ready to write it off as a mental break or a fugue state or anything that meant they could move forward with their lives. But David was wrong. Subtly at first, small personality changes, forgotten memories, emotional flatness. Then more obviously, he stopped sleeping, stopped eating, moved with an uncanny precision that was almost mechanical. When Sarah finally confronted him, when she looked into his eyes and demanded to know what happened to the man she loved, something else looked back at her. Something that spoke with David's voice, but wasn't David. Something that told her she would be next if she didn't run. So she ran. And 3 days later, The thing wearing David's face walked into a police station and confessed to killing his fiancée. They never found a body, of course, because Sarah wasn't dead. But the search shifted from rescue to recovery, and Sarah Kellerman became legally dead, unable to ever reclaim her identity without risking everything. That's what they do, she told me, her voice hollow. They take people and send back something that looks right but isn't. They infiltrate, they replace. And nobody knows, because who would believe it? Who would believe that the person who came back from a camping trip or a night out isn't the same person who left? The implications were staggering and terrifying. How many people were walking around wearing human faces but housing something else? How deep did this infiltration go? And what was the end game? What were these things trying to achieve? We needed answers. And more than that, we needed a way to stop them. It took us 5 more years to find Dr. Catherine Wright. She was a former aerospace engineer who'd worked on classified government projects before going rogue, dedicating her life to researching what she called non-human intelligence integration events. In less clinical terms, alien infiltration. She'd lost her security clearance, her reputation, and most of her colleagues when she started speaking publicly about what she'd learned in those classified programs. But she'd also accumulated more concrete data about the lights and their purposes than anyone else we'd encountered. Her facility was hidden in the mountains of Montana, a converted bunker that housed servers, research equipment, and a small community of people like us. Runners who decided hiding wasn't enough. People who wanted to fight back. When Sarah and I arrived, exhausted and desperate, Catherine took one look at us and said, "You've seen them, and you ran. Good. That means you can still be saved." What Catherine taught us changed everything. The lights weren't alien in the science fiction sense. They were something far stranger and more ancient. Interdimensional entities that existed in a reality adjacent to ours, feeding on something she called conscious energy, the ineffable quality that made humans more than just biological machines. Our souls, for lack of a better term. They couldn't fully manifest in our reality, not permanently, but they could project themselves temporarily, long enough to mark targets and initiate the transfer process. When someone submitted to the lights, when they let themselves be taken, these entities copied their consciousness, their memories, their entire neurological pattern. Then they sent back a shell, a biological duplicate that looked and sounded and superficially acted like the original, but was actually a puppet being controlled from another dimension. Think of it like a computer program, Catherine explained, showing us brain scans of returned individuals versus baseline humans. They download everything that makes you you, then use your body as a biological drone to interact with our world. But the original consciousness, that's been harvested, trapped in their dimension, gone. The scans showed distinct differences in neural activity. Returned individuals had patterns that were too regular, too precise. Human consciousness is messy, chaotic, and beautiful in its complexity. These things were mimicking consciousness, but their simulation was too perfect. They lacked the organic chaos that defined humanity. So everyone who didn't run, I said slowly, horror dawning, everyone who submitted to the lights, is gone, Catherine finished. Their bodies are still here, still functioning, but the person who inhabited them has been extracted and trapped in a dimension we can barely conceive of, while something else wears their skin. Sarah and I looked at each other. the same terrible question in both our minds. How many? How many people had been replaced? How deep did this go? Catherine pulled up a database that made my blood run cold. Thousands of names. Thousands of missing persons cases that matched the pattern, dating back decades. And those were just the ones she'd been able to confirm. The actual number could be exponentially higher. Most replacements went undetected because they were so good at mimicking human behavior. Why? I asked. Why are they doing this? Catherine's expression was grim. We don't know their ultimate goal, infiltration, obviously, building some kind of presence in our world. But to what end? She shook her head. That's what we're trying to figure out, before it's too late. This was it. The answer to the question that had haunted me for 8 years. I hadn't been crazy. I hadn't imagined things. I'd encountered something real and terrifying, and I'd made the right choice in running. But the validation came with a crushing weight of responsibility. Because now that I knew the truth, I had to decide what to do with it. Going public was suicide. We'd be dismissed as conspiracy theorists at best, institutionalized at worst. The replaced individuals had positions of power, influence, authority. They would discredit us effortlessly. But staying hidden meant letting this continue, letting more people be harvested, more families destroyed, more of humanity slowly replaced by things wearing our faces. Catherine offered us a third option: join her team. Use our unique perspective as runners to help research these entities, find their weaknesses, develop a way to detect and stop them. It wasn't much, but it was something. A way to fight back. A purpose beyond mere survival. Sarah agreed immediately. I hesitated, thinking of my parents, of the life I'd left behind, of all the years I'd stolen from them by disappearing. But then I thought of Marcus Webb's empty eyes, of David speaking with something else's voice, of thousands of families who'd lost loved ones to an evil they couldn't comprehend or fight. I agreed, and for the next 7 years, that bunker in Montana became my home. That ragtag team of researchers and runners became my family, and the fight against an invisible invasion became my purpose. We made progress. Slow, frustrating, often dangerous progress, but progress nonetheless. We developed detection methods, specific questions that replaced individuals couldn't answer correctly because they lacked the emotional context to understand them. We mapped the patterns of light appearances and found they were increasing in frequency. We even managed to develop a kind of early warning system, triangulating reports of unusual phenomena to predict where they might appear next. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A runner named Marcus, yes, the same Marcus Webb I'd seen taken all those years ago, walked into our facility, fully human, fully himself, or at least mostly himself. He'd been taken, replaced, and somehow managed to escape from the other dimension. It took him 11 years, but he'd found a way back, forcing his consciousness back into his own body and expelling the entity that had been controlling it. The process had nearly killed him, and it left him changed. He could sense the replaced ones now, could feel the dimensional wrongness of them in a way the rest of us couldn't. More importantly, he remembered. He remembered the other side, the dimension where the harvested consciousnesses were kept. And he remembered seeing thousands upon thousands of them there. Human souls trapped in an alien reality, aware and conscious but powerless, forced to watch through their own eyes as something else lived their lives. They're building an army, Marcus told us, his voice shaking from the effort of speaking about it. Our bodies are just the beginning. They're learning from us, studying us. Each person they take teaches them more about how to pass as human. They're getting better at it. Soon they won't need to just mimic consciousness. They'll be able to genuinely replicate it. And when that happens, he didn't need to finish. We all understood. When they perfected the replacement process, when they could create perfect duplicates that even the most advanced scanning couldn't differentiate from real humans, the invasion would be complete. They wouldn't need to hide anymore. Marcus also brought hope, though, because if he could escape, others could too. And if we could figure out how he did it, we might be able to create a rescue operation. We might be able to bring back the thousands of consciousnesses that had been trapped, restore them to their bodies, undo at least some of the damage these entities had done. Catherine threw every resource we had into studying Marcus, understanding the mechanism of his escape, trying to replicate it. And slowly, painfully, we began to develop a theory. The entities couldn't maintain their hold on a body if the original consciousness fought hard enough from the other side. But fighting required knowing you were trapped, understanding what had happened to you. Most harvested individuals didn't know. They were kept in a kind of stasis, aware but confused, unable to comprehend their situation. But if we could communicate with them, if we could wake them up and teach them to fight, it became our mission, our obsession. Sarah and I worked 18-hour days, running tests, developing communication protocols, trying to find a way to reach across dimensional barriers to the trapped souls on the other side. We failed more often than we succeeded, but gradually, we started getting responses, faint, confused, but real. We were reaching them. Then, on May the 14th, 2023, exactly 15 years after my disappearance, we achieved full contact. We successfully communicated with a harvested consciousness, explained their situation, and guided them through the process of fighting back against the entity controlling their body. It took 6 hours of careful instruction, of coaching them through the most difficult mental battle of their life. But at the end of those 6 hours, Jennifer Martinez opened her eyes in her home in Colorado, fully herself for the first time in 3 years. She immediately called the police, hysterical, insisting she'd been gone and something else had been living her life. They thought she was having a mental breakdown, of course. But Catherine had prepared for this. We had protocols in place, ways to document and verify that Jennifer was genuinely restored, that she possessed knowledge and memories the replaced version hadn't had access to. It wasn't much. 1 person out of thousands. But it was proof of concept. We could bring them back. We could fight this. And that's when I made my decision. 15 years I'd been gone. 15 years my parents had suffered, but now I had something to offer them beyond just my return. I had purpose, I had answers, I had a mission that mattered. It was time to go home. The house looked the same. Smaller somehow, the way childhood places always are when you return as an adult, but fundamentally unchanged. The same blue shutters, the same maple tree in the front yard where I used to climb as a kid. The same porch where my dad and I used to sit on summer evenings, drinking lemonade and talking about nothing in particular. I stood across the street for 20 minutes, gathering courage, rehearsing what I'd say. How do you apologize for 15 years? How do you explain the unexplainable? How do you tell your parents you chose to stay away, let them suffer, because the alternative was worse. My dad saw me first. He was taking out the trash, moving slowly like his back hurt. He'd aged so much. His hair was completely gray now, his shoulders stooped, his movements careful and pained. He looked up, and our eyes met across the lawn. The trash bag fell from his hands. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. For a terrible moment, I thought he might collapse, that the shock might literally kill him. But then he was running. This old man who moved like every step hurt was sprinting across the lawn with more speed than should have been possible. He hit me like a linebacker, arms wrapping around me with bruising force, and we both went down onto the grass. He was sobbing deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body, and I realized I was crying too. 15 years of guilt and longing and love pouring out of me in a flood I couldn't control. "Brandon," he kept saying over and over. "Brandon, Brandon, oh my God, Brandon." My mother's scream brought the neighbors running. She flew out of the house and threw herself on top of both of us, and we lay there in a pile on the front lawn. 3 people who'd been torn apart and were somehow impossibly together again. Whole again. The explanations came later. The difficult conversations about where I'd been, why I'd stayed away, what I'd been doing for 15 years. I told them everything, knowing they'd probably think I was insane. The lights, the entities, the replaced people, the dimensional barriers, the rescue operations, all of it. My mother held my hand the entire time, like she was afraid I'd vanish again if she let go. My father's expression cycled through disbelief, anger, grief, and finally grudging acceptance. Because as crazy as my story sounded, I was here, I was real. And after 15 years of no answers, even an impossible answer was better than nothing. "You couldn't call?" my mother asked, her voice breaking. "In 15 years, you couldn't let us know you were alive?" "I wanted to," I said, the guilt crushing my chest. "Every single day I wanted to. But I couldn't risk leading them to you. I couldn't risk you being the next ones taken." "So you let us think you were dead," my father said. And there was anger there, justified and deep. "I let you think I was lost," I corrected. "I never wanted you to stop hoping. I took a shaky breath. "I wanted to come back when I could offer you something more than just me. When I could give you a reason why, when I could make the last 15 years mean something." I showed them the research. Catherine had prepared documentation, evidence, case files of people we'd rescued. It wasn't enough to convince the world, but it was enough to plant doubt, to make them question, to make them consider that maybe their son wasn't crazy. Maybe he'd been fighting a war they couldn't see. "What happens now?" my mother asked. "Now we fight," I said. "We bring back everyone who was taken. We stop these things from taking anyone else. We take back our world." My father looked at me for a long moment, and I saw him wrestling with everything I'd told him, trying to reconcile the son he remembered with the man I'd become. Finally, he nodded. "Then we fight with you." That's how my parents joined the resistance. Annette Swanson, who'd spent 15 years searching for her son, became our public face. A grieving mother-turned-advocate who could speak about missing persons with an authority nobody could question. Brandon Swanson, with his farming connections and deep roots in rural Minnesota, became our network builder, recruiting other families who'd lost loved ones, creating a grassroots organization of people ready to believe the unbelievable. We're not hiding anymore. We're organizing, building, fighting back Every week, we rescue more trapped consciousnesses. Every month, we expose more replaced individuals. It's dangerous work. The entities know about us now, and they're actively hunting those of us who fight back. But we're not alone, we're not scared, and we're not stopping. Brandon Swanson disappeared on May the 14th, 2008, but he came back. Not as the same person. You can't live through what I lived through and remain unchanged. But I came back stronger, more purpose-driven, and finally able to give my parents the answer they'd been searching for. The lights are still out there. The entities are still taking people. But now, when someone encounters them, now when someone feels that primal terror and makes the choice to run, they're not alone. We have networks. We have safe houses. We have protocols. And most importantly, we have hope. This is my confession. This is my truth. And this is my promise. Every person who was taken, every consciousness that was harvested, every family that was destroyed, we're coming for them. We're bringing them home. The fight isn't over. It's just beginning. And I need you to be part of it. Share this story. Help us spread the word. Because the person sitting next to you, the colleague at work, the friend you've known for years, they might not be who they appear to be. And the only way we stop this is together. My name is Brandon Swanson. I died on May the 14th, 2008, and I came back to save the others who can't save themselves.